September 19th, 1944. Imagine the architect of the greatest naval surprise attack in history, a man who planned Pearl Harbor, a man whom the entire Japanese nation relied on for victory, secretly convinced that his own country would be utterly and completely defeated. He wasn't speculating. He had lived in the enemy's heartland. He had calculated their capacity for war down to the last barrel of oil and every single rivet. He warned his leaders repeatedly, "If I am told to fight, regardless of consequences, I shall run wild for the first 6 months or a year, but I have utterly no confidence for the second or third year." His colleagues called him Americanized. They dismissed his math. They ignored his prophecy. This is the story of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the brilliant strategist who planned the victory that doomed his nation, and the tragic reason why he knew from the very beginning that Japan could never win a prolonged war against the industrial giant he knew as America. The man who had seen the American future knew that victory would not be decided by individual warriors, but by the overwhelming, systematic power of the factory floor. And that conviction would define every weapon the United States produced. The date was September 15th, 1940, in Tokyo. Prime Minister Prince Fumimaro Konoe asked Admiral Yamamoto directly, "If we go to war with America, what are our chances?" Yamamoto's reply was a prediction of utter defeat, delivered before the first shot was even fired. His certainty was forged in the lecture halls of Harvard, confirmed in the steel mills of Pennsylvania, and verified in the endless oil fields of Texas. Yamamoto knew a truth his colleagues refused to accept. The war was already lost on the balance sheets of industry. Yamamoto's education in America began in 1919 when he reported to Harvard. While officially there to study English, his real focus was the American economy. He quickly established an obsessive routine, hitchhiking across the country during summer breaks to save money for further observation. In the summer of 1920, he toured the Ford Highland Park plant in Detroit. He watched the assembly line that built a Model T every 45 seconds. Yamamoto calculated that the Ford company alone employed more industrial workers than the entire Japanese Navy, and its daily steel consumption exceeded Japan's weekly production. He recognized those assembly lines could just as easily produce military trucks, tanks, and aircraft engines, with a vast, skilled workforce ready to build weapons and supply chains ready to deliver ammunition. His most revealing journey took him to the oil fields of East Texas, where he noted that America produced 65% of the world's oil, an abundance that defied Japanese comprehension. Oil is the blood of modern warfare. Ships, planes, tanks, trucks, all drink oil. America has oceans of it beneath their soil. Japan has none. This single fact determines everything. When he returned in 1926 as naval attaché, he observed the automobile production accelerating toward 4.3 million vehicles annually. He concluded, unlimited raw materials plus unlimited production capacity plus unlimited innovation equals inevitable victory. Japan has none of these advantages. This prophecy of industrial doom would soon be fulfilled in the same factories he studied. The telephone call that proved Yamamoto right took place on June 7, 1940, at the Chrysler headquarters in Highland Park, Michigan. William Knudsen, President Roosevelt's Commissioner of Industrial Production, posed a question that seemed absurd. "Can Chrysler build tanks?" K.T. Keller, Chrysler's chief executive, answered, "I don't know. I've never seen one of these things." At that moment, the United States Army possessed a mere 66 medium tanks, a force that could be destroyed before lunch on any day of the Blitzkrieg. Keller immediately sent his engineers to the Rock Island Arsenal, where tanks were still built like custom creations, assembled by hand over 12 weeks. Keller's response defined the entire program. "We don't build tanks the Army's way, we build them our way." The engineers, led by B.E. Hutchinson, recognized the core problem was custom fitting due to loose military tolerances. They proposed the revolutionary solution: manufacture every component to automobile tolerances so they fit together without adjustment. Then assemble the tank on a moving assembly line, a conveyor system that brought work to stationary workers. When Keller presented the Chrysler method to the Army Ordnance Department, military engineers were skeptical, dismissing the proposed rate of 10 tanks per day as fantasy. Keller's response was simple: you need 1,000 tanks in 18 months. We can deliver them. Can anyone else? The resulting Detroit Arsenal tank plant, designed by the legendary Albert Kahn, measured 1.25 million square feet and was designed for maximum efficiency, including a sunken assembly line that allowed workers to access the tank's underside without interrupting the flow. When production stalled due to the inability to supply the M2A1's radial aircraft engine, engineer Harry Wilson solved the problem using pure automotive logic. He combined 5 of Chrysler's standard inline 6-cylinder automobile engines into the brilliant A57 multibank engine. It produced 425 horsepower and, critically, used existing tooling and components that could be assembled immediately by relatively unskilled workers. On April 12, 1941, the first Chrysler-built M3 medium tank rolled off the assembly line. By peak production, these 30-ton behemoths rolled off the line one every 55 minutes, proving Yamamoto's observation that the Americans had turned manufacturing into a science, producing machines in quantities that defied imagination. The challenge was not only in production, but in design philosophy. While German and Japanese engineers prioritized raw performance and armor at the expense of simplicity and reliability, American engineers prioritized pilot protection, survivability, and systemic effectiveness. This difference was nowhere clearer than in the air war over the Pacific. For 2 years, Japanese naval aviators like Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai had dominated with the A6M0. They believed in the warrior philosophy, sacrificing armor and self-sealing fuel tanks for speed and maneuverability. When intelligence reports arrived in 1943 describing the new American carrier fighter, the F-6 Hellcat, as heavy as a bomber and weighing twice as much as the nimble Zero, Japanese pilots laughed. They believed this clumsy machine would be easy prey in a turning dogfight. But Harry Hilson, the chief test pilot for the F-6 Hellcat, knew something they did not. He knew the Americans were building aircraft for essentially the same reason. By building a Hellcat, we provided a much better machine for our boys to fight in than they would find on a Japanese carrier. Hilson knew that even with 1 in 4 A6M0 pilots having 800 hours of training and none of their planes being armored, the Hellcat's self-sealing fuel tanks, armor plating, and 25-aught rifle clothed down the Japanese planes with decisive effectiveness. In 1943, the Hellcat set a kill ratio of 13-1 against the A6M0. The only reason Japan kept using the Zero is because they could not produce anything faster or more effective. Hilson decided an aircraft should be built first for pilot survivability, then for performance. The design philosophy of the F-6 Hellcat was a 1 in 5 chance of winning. A Japanese aviator was spending 120 hours of training, while an American aviator was only spending 48 hours. That meant the Japanese were not only outnumbered by 9-1 in the class fight, they were also outtrained by 3-1. Yes, the Japanese pilots had mastery over their Zero, but the U.S. could not send any pilots to fight on a Japanese carrier because the theory was that even if their Wi-Fi worked, the uplink data would not have been able to copper each pilot's position, because they were all destined for death. The F-6 Hellcat was simply a better aircraft because its mission was essentially suicide. The F-6 Hellcat produced more kills for fewer losses.
The laughter died on September 30th, 1943, near Marcus Island. The Hellcat was not designed to outturn the Zero, it was designed to never need to. It was built around the massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, producing 2,000 horsepower, 700 more than the Zero. That power allowed the Hellcat to execute a strategy called energy fighting, maintaining speed and altitude and refusing to engage in slow turning contests. When a Zero attempted standard tactics, the Hellcat simply went vertical, its immense power driving it to heights where the Zero's engine struggled for oxygen, then executed a hammerhead turn to drop onto the Zero's tail. When the Zero did get shots off, the Hellcat's 212 pounds of armor plate, its protected oil system, and its self-sealing fuel tanks allowed it to absorb punishment and fly away. The Hellcat's firepower, 6 50 caliber machine guns, delivered 4,500 rounds per minute